listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me, as always, Kevin. Kevin, you holiday?
It was good. How was yours?
It was good. Just a nice, quiet trip this time. We're seeing some family in the first couple of weeks of January, but overall, a pretty chill holiday. So definitely nice. What was not nice is that we had to go several days without hockey. And then if you were expecting a show last week, we just had to move some things around. We were thinking about not doing a show this week either. So, we basically just moved last week to this week. Schedule continues as normal, in case you were wondering. Also, while you're here, subscribe to us everywhere. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us everywhere you find your podcasts. Find us on sportstalkphilly.com. Okay, moving beyond that, we do have some hockey to get into now. Flyers played between our last show and now. The Flyers played 5 games. 4 of them came before the Christmas break, so we're kind of just going to run through those pretty quickly here. We will focus a little bit more on the Cutter Gauthier game, the Anaheim game on Sunday, and then we are recording this in our more traditional Sunday morning spot, so we are recording it before the Kings game on Sunday night. Mm-hmm. But okay, diving right into it. We want to start with Anaheim.
Yeah, I mean it's the most recent thing. Let's just go with that.
Yeah, so like the graphic here says, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Flyers return from winter break with a win in Anaheim. I just made reference to it as the Cutter Gauthier game, and that was a little bit of a joke, but honestly, it seemed on social media that was kind of the main story-line going into this.
It was,
and again, on social media. I do not think the players cared that much.
Because he bought into it. That's what I'm saying. He gets interviewed. He bought into it. So it was a topic 24 hours before the game. When I think the game actually got played, it was hardly a this player versus that player kind of thing. It for what it's worth to, first of all, I think it matters that locale matters in this situation because it'll be different in Philly. Everybody knows that it'll be different in Philly. Like
January 11th, I think is the game.
What's that?
I think the Ducks come to Philly on January 11th.
Yes, that's correct.
Just a couple of weeks from now.
Quite literally, and I've said this before on a previous show, but quite literally 3 days from after the anniversary of the trade. So that doesn't hurt either, obviously. But no, I kind of just what was that very, and it wasn't even, I don't even want to call it media driven because I don't even think that it was that media driven either.
Media driven specifically,
right? I think it was more of a fan. It was a fan thing more than anything, especially in this particular thing because, to be honest with you, the games like this, if it wasn't even for Cutter Gauthier, a game like this typically lacks juice anyway. It's the Ducks. I mean, like, there's not exactly a whole lot that you go off of with this. I mean, about the one thing you will get is that it's a typically well-traveled game.
Yeah.
I saw a few clips.
And man, it sure was.
Well, I saw a few clips that, and again, this is more the social media driven part that you're talking about, but I saw a few clips that at least said that over the broadcast that Cutter Gauthier was getting booed on home ice, no less, which means that there was a contingent of Flyers fans there. I saw a few things pop up, and I get that, right? Like, I understand how people react to this still. Like, how people react to this type of stuff and things like that. There's 2 problems with the game itself, which is one, the matchup itself, if you took the Gauthier aspect out of it, lacks juice anyway.
Shouldn't be close.
Well, no, just lacks juice in general. Like, I don't know about shouldn't be close, honestly, because like, you've got 2 teams that are relatively close in a lot of things. Like,
it's kind of funny because it seems like at least a little bit the teams are almost having opposite problems. Anaheim's getting really, really good goaltending, but just can't
score
enough offense across to win games.
They can't score. Just tell it like it is.
Fair enough. And then the Flyers, have generated offense at times. They haven't at other times, but I think the Flyers' biggest issue at this point has been the goaltending.
Yeah,
right.
Defense. I lump it together because there's been way too many. We're going to get into that later, but there's been way too many breakdowns, and you're right. Look, coming into this game, and I'll give the headline of it, I guess, before we really dive into that issue. But they coming into the game, it allowed 28 goals in the previous 5 games. Like, that's beyond a problem.
And like you mentioned, it's not just the goaltending, it is the defense too. Like it's kind of a team problem. But I
Sure.
did want to mention as we start talking about defensemen, I did want to mention the other half of kind of the Cutter Gauthier side of this story, and that would be the guy he was traded for.
Right.
Jamie Drysdale played his first game back in Anaheim. So here's the thing about this whole returning players playing against my old team thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what bug crawled up Cutter Gauthier's ass. I don't. But he seems to have a problem with this organization. He was fired up to play. He was talking about it in the media beforehand. He was chirping Travis Konecny in the game. And he was definitely active in the game.
Yeah, and then he
And
was
I,
so fired up that he was a plus one that he wasn't involved in the goal. Took a penalty on his first shift of the game, play or second shift of the game, I think it was. Only played 13 minutes 19 seconds. Had 2 shots on goal and 3 giveaways.
I wasn't gonna turn it into a bashing session on the guy,
No, but
but
I'm saying the guy did nothing in the game. Neither did
no,
half of the Flyers either, for that
oh,
matter. I
of
mean, there was
course.
a very small handful of players that did anything in this game. It was that kind of game. It was just
But what I was gonna get to is that I don't really understand where Cutter Gauthier is coming from. Obviously, he has his reasons. I suspect they're Keith Yandel, Kevin Hayes related reasons, but I don't know that
if
for
look,
sure. And nobody does, and it's useless to speculate. I do understand that.
well, no, you know what it was
He's
that the
made a decision.
you know what it was that the broadcast brought up is that he said at some point people will find out that, and maybe they will, maybe they won't, is what it is, because
Hey, sure.
he's said in the past that he would be like later on that
He's
would come
gonna
out.
go on Spit and Chicklets and talk about it.
Probably, I look
Let's move
whatever.
on.
But whatever. I don't care what the outlet is for telling it. If he wants to tell it eventually, then okay, fine. I have a funny feeling we may never know the answer, or it will,
I
it'll
agree.
come, or it'll come out 20 years from now when his
Post
career is
career
long over, and
in the Players Tribune article or
well, yeah,
whatever.
because guess what? I mean, look, I'm not saying that nobody knew the reason Eric Lindros didn't want to play in Quebec over all of those years, but it really didn't completely become like a full-on thing where he told all until long after he was done playing. He was a Hall
We
of
all had a
Famer.
we all had a pretty good idea that he didn't want to play for
Right. No,
that
no, I
long.
get and I get that, but I'm saying to actually hear the story from the person involved, he was already in the Hall of Fame by the time he was really willing to sit down and go full detail into what the reasoning behind it was. And I feel like that's the
Mm,
type of situation you're looking at here where it might come out the reason why at some point somebody might let it get out there, but it will not.
I'm sure he's told people.
I don't think you'll ever hear from Cutter Gauthier about this until long after his career is over, that it is was and to be honest with you, here's the other part of that equation. Eric Lindros' his story matters in that sense because he did turn out to be a Hall of Fame level player, or go into the Hall of Fame at least. I know that there's some debate about that because of how long he played and all that stuff like that, but he is in the Hall of Fame, right? Like he's in the Hall of Fame. So as such, that's the type of career that was had, and he gets, now he tells that story down the line. Cutter Gauthier may not be anything more than just your average NHL player down the line. We don't know, like he's a rookie. We don't know the answer to this story. He could be a superstar. He could be a very good player. He could be an average player. He could burn out after 3 years. We don't know the answer to this yet. And I think that will influence some of whether or not people even care to hear the story.
That's cool. If he's telling the story in a bar as a bartender at 33 because he's been washed out of his career, it's gonna hold a lot
Well,
more
right. Like
weight.
if he has the Nolan Patrick career, do we even care about the story?
No, but
Right.
what I'm saying is I set all that up because I actually it's funny, I set all that up because I didn't really want to focus on the negative. I wanted to focus on the other side and the Jamie Drysdale and the fact that I do understand some amount of emotion on his side. Now, obviously, it's not this
Well, yeah, as
anger
soon as
or
you've played
whatever it is.
as soon as you've
Right.
played for a team, yes, there's a history there. He
Ex-
played in Anaheim.
Exactly. I was going to say it's not like he doesn't have this anger, right? Because he didn't ask out of Anaheim. He wasn't. They just traded him.
Right.
But he still has friends on the team. He's still friends with Trevor Zegras. He still, I assume, still sees some amount of those guys in the off season. Um,
Um Debatable, because I think he stayed around the area a lot this summer, so I think he stayed
that's
with his
fair.
new teammates more than his ex-teammates.
Listen, you're
But
you're telling me Trevor Zegras didn't come run around South Jersey for a week or two with him? Come on.
I mean, look, possible. I will I can give you this much, and I forget who it was who put it out there after the game, but somebody who was there in Anaheim to cover the game did say that even though he's injured right now, Zegras stayed around afterwards, was basically right outside the Flyers locker room so he could meet up with Jamie Drysdale after the game. Yes,
It
that did happen.
yes. It strikes me as the kind of thing, and I don't know if it's the same as Gabe Landeskog traveling for Eric Johnson's 1000th game.
No, but
It
there's a
wouldn't
bond, and
surprise
if
me
you
if
have a friend, you have a friend, you know?
but it wouldn't surprise me if Trevor Zegras hopped on a flight to Philly in 2 weeks and came out with the boys, depending on how long the trip is.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, and it's hard because when you're hurt and you're not able to play, it's a totally different story. Like if he was healthy, I totally envision that if they're they're there the night before, it's the Friday before a game,
We're
you
going
have the Saturday, you're
yeah.
getting dinner. Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
going to McCormick and Schmitz. We're going we're
But
going somewhere else.
you get the point. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I get that there. I don't know about, like this might have been the chance. And in fairness, the Landeskog one for Eric Johnson was around the 1000th game thing, so it was a much more monumental moment than it was just, hey, I want to see my buddy.
And that is why I love that, because I know it's not exactly the same. But
Sure.
regardless, it was nice to see Jamie Drysdale, be welcomed back. Like I don't think they gave him a video package or anything, but I
I didn't
think
hear of anything, but he didn't
I think he was appreciated at least by the fans for his time in Anaheim.
and look, in fairness, he because he didn't play a terrible game, he didn't play a great game per se. Like he kind of had one of those middle of the road games. I didn't really find anybody on the defensive core that played great in this game, to be honest. I thought that more than anything, it was kind of hold your own more than anything. I mean, look, you can, yeah, and we've talked before about the 3 stars thing that I have to do after every game. It might have been valid for me to give all 3 stars to Sam Ersson in this one.
He was really good.
And it was needed. He needed a game like this. They needed a game from a goaltender like this. All of the above, right? Like I think, and it was very important that he had that kind of game. And
I think they did a decent job keeping the shots on him as relatively low danger. Like he wasn't getting pummeled in this game with high danger chances the whole night
I
or
mean,
afternoon.
it's interesting because I thought that at different points during the game, they did look dangerous, though. Like, that's just a team that can't finish. I mean, I didn't realize how bad it was. Like, admittedly, I'm not staying up and watching Anaheim games on a regular basis. So sometimes I don't get a feel for how good or bad a team is until I'm putting the preview together and kind of seeing some of the numbers and things like that. I didn't realize that. I did not realize they do not have a player, at least entering the game, that their leading scorer had 25 points.
And I believe Corey Terry was their first player to hit the 10-goal mark on the season with his goal in the second period.
I mean, he one of the only guys that was going to pull off anything like he did in that game anyway. I mean, it was they had enough guys that were kind of just there for this game to a degree. I mean, like they had, don't get me wrong, they had guys who were good, who I think clearly posed a threat to scoring at times. I feel like I heard
Well, you mentioned that they look dangerous at times, but it never felt like team danger to me. It always kind of felt like individual player is making a play. Like Leo Carlson gets a turnover in the slot and, gets a reasonable shot out
and
of
he
it.
was one of the guys I was going to point out that was like, he had a game where it was like, hey, he's dangerous. You got to be careful. Mason McTavish had a really strong game.
Mason McTavish looked in the game, and this might be a little bit of an overstatement. It was one game, small sample. He looked like he could be a Tom Wilson type player at some point. I mean, maybe with turn the knob a little bit more for the scoring and skill.
From the box score, you're not wrong when you consider that he had 6 shots on goal and 4 hits, and even though he didn't factor in points wise, was on the ice for the only goal scored. All
was
of
a
it,
physical presence the whole game.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, the Ducks are no joke, right? You have Budas and Trudeau on the back end. Like, they can handle their own physically. But Mason McTavish was, I think, the most prominent
he led
player.
he led the team in hits. So he out hit. I mean, guess what? You mentioned the other 2. Gudis and Truba combined for 3 hits in the game. Now, hits is a very relative stat when it comes to how they keep it.
And it
I
has
get
almost
that.
nothing to do with actually making body contact with somebody else. It has to separate them from the puck. It's a whole thing. But Radko Gudas and Jacob Truba are masters of the you made a pass and now I'm going to staple you to the boards, and that doesn't typically get counted as a hit.
I mean, Radko Gudis had an assist in the game over, having just 2 hits in the game. What does that tell you? You know what kind of game it was also. I mean, and that's part of what I think like there's an element where if this is a normal average game that doesn't come out of a 4-day break like everybody was just on, that's probably a more physical game. It's probably, it's probably one, like honestly, there's an element of where, like I'm sure that people look at the Ducks and sit there and go, how did the Flyers not put this team away 5-1? Because they're big, because they're physical, like the Flyers don't handle physical teams very well, which we'll get into more as the show goes on, because the looking ahead is going to feature a few more physical teams. Don't you worry about that. But it's one of those situations when you and when you can lead off the discussion of the back end, even if they're not the 2 best defensemen, you lead off the discussion of the back end with Radko Gudas, Jacob Truba, and then go back and look and realize they weren't even the 2 most physical players on the team in the game. That's telling you something. I mean, it was that kind of game.
Let's talk a little bit about the offense.
Okay. Yeah. I assume you want to lead off with the guy who scored the first goal, because
I
he's
sure
scoring a
do.
lot of the goals.
Is that 5 straight games with a goal for Noah Cates?
That's correct.
5 straight games with a goal for Noah Cates.
Yeah, that's correct. Spoiler alert, he's the player to watch against the Kings tonight.
Right. Like, I know there's a lot more that goes into it than this, but is Noah Cates one of your answers at center on this team? Like, is this an option?
It's definitely an option. Because I honestly think that it's less about Cates and more about the line. You found a combination that works. And it's one of the few that you've had that works right now. Like there is absolutely no reason to separate Cates, Brink, and Forster right now.
Nope. They've been playing great.
Yeah. So there's absolutely no reason to do it. You've got a group right now that like Kate, it's not only that Cates has scored in 5 straight games, it's he's got an assist in there as well. So he's got 6 points over the 5 games. And take away the fact that nobody really did anything offensively against Minnesota, because that was just a rough game. Marc-Andre Fleury was good. We talked about that on the previous show. I'm not trying to rehash the whole game, but that was a game where points were going to, like, they only scored 1 goal in the game. It wasn't much of that kind of thing. He had an assist against Detroit at home and had a goal against Columbus on the road on December 10th also. So we're talking about a guy who's got 7 goals on the year and has scored 6 of them in his last 8 games. And has 2 assists to go with that. So he's got 8 points in his last 8 games for a guy who's got 13 points on the season. So this was let's be real. This guy was pretty much like a nobody on this team at that point, right? Like,
he's just a guy. He's playing in the middle 6.
He's just a guy. He's playing in the middle. Exactly. He was. I mean, coming into the year, we talked about this guy as a possibility of being the 13th forward. We didn't know where his place was. And now it feels like you have to keep him in your bottom 6.
No, so we thought he was the 13th forward, but we really only thought he was the 13th forward because Jet Luchenko was hanging around. Like, I think a lot of people were looking at it and going, well, once Jet goes back, Kate slots right in.
Well, he does, but at the same time, it was clear that it wasn't the same thing, especially from the offensive side of things. And you're starting, I mean, we're talking about now, based on this little run that he's on, look, I don't know if he's because he played a lot more minutes in that rookie season that he had. So I don't know if we're on track for the point total, but the goal total's there. He had 13 goals that rookie season. He's at 7 now. It's perfectly reasonable to think that he's got a shot at 13 again, or 15 for that matter.
He's picking a pretty good time to do it too. Obviously not in this time of the season, but this season as a whole, because his contract is up after this season. He's an RFA with our Brights, 1 year from UFA. It's time to sign a big boy deal, Tyson, and scoring goals is a good way to pick that up.
And to surpass his goal total from a year ago already with that goal on Saturday in Anaheim. He's up to 7. He had 6 goals last season. He only had 18 points last season. This is in 59 games, by the way. And I know that at one point in time for him, I think part of it was there was an injury. He missed time with an injury. I get that. You play 59 games, he only had 18 points. He's clearly showing you that he's better than 18 points in a season and just being a guy.
Well, and not only is he scoring, he is elevating his line mates. Can we talk about how good Bobby Brink has looked? Like over a
I
similar stretch?
I don't think it's as big a part of the equation as you're going to make it out to be, though. Like yes, they elevate each other. I'm not saying that's not part of the equation, but I think Brink has come into his own a little bit here,
That's what I'm
and is doing
saying.
this on his own. I
Well,
don't think this has to do
I
with
think
like completely with his line mates. As much as I'll admit, the one thing I will say still about Bobby Brink, uh, you know, from a size perspective, and he's improved in that area, but he still has the moment where, like, perfect example, he got completely flattened in the Anaheim game at one point. Now
yeah.
pops right back up and everything's fine. And I get that. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. He's been better in that area. I'm not trying to like make that one example be like, oh, well, he's still a pushover. No, he's hardly that. He's much more tenacious on the puck. He's much more engaged in battle. You've got a lot of things that go into his favor now that make him a more solidified NHLer than he was a year ago. And I think it's valid to look at John Tortorella talked about it after this particular game about, they've gone through a lot together in terms of, Bobby Brink was not a firm part of the lineup last season. And it
I was gonna
starts to
say,
feel like he's a firm part of the lineup now.
I am so glad you used the term solid NHLer or whatever you used, because I think that is the primary reason for all this. I think he feels comfortable in his roster spot. He is on an established line. He's not getting juggled around every 3 shifts and is starting to get comfortable in the NHL, right? Because he's been up. How many career games does he have?
Does Brink have?
Yeah,
I do have to look
it,
that one up probably because it's more than.
probably something in the 75
Oh well,
range.
actually, wait a minute. I don't have to look it up. He just hit a milestone. He played his 100th game on
Well,
Saturday.
that was his 100th. Okay, I'm sorry. So he
Yes.
just played his 100th game, and we're about 30 games into this season. So before this season, he's played about 70 spread over the previous 2.
Right. So there's an easy way to look at it actually, because he's only played in parts of 3 seasons anyway. So he played 10 coming out of like getting a chance and actually that wasn't even 10 right away. He didn't play for the Flyers at all in 22-23 because I think that was the year with the hip issue and he didn't come back until halfway through the
Mm,
year. And then he had to basically kind of ride it out in the minors because he was still getting his feet wet again, playing wise. He had 4 assists in the 10 games he got in 21-22. So, okay, there was something there. But last season was realistically his rookie year.
how
And
many games was it?
57. Now, he's not, even this season, he's not the goal scorer I think you want him to be for what his skill
Enough.
set is. Because he had 11 goals last year. He's only got 4 this year. And we're past actually halfway to his season total from a year ago, like in terms of games played.
Games played.
So his his goal scoring pace is not there.
Okay.
His points pace is there because
Well,
he had 23 points last year and he's got 16 now.
and how much of his goal scoring pace isn't there because of the guys he's playing with?
And that you could trace that to earlier
Because
this
he's
year
finding himself as a bit
for
of a
sure.
well, and even
And
now he's probably going to find himself as a setup guy. I mean, Forrester's a shooter. Cates has a shot. I can see Brink
can I
ending up as the setup guy on that line.
see? I don't know that there is going to be a guy one or the other because Forrester's got a shot, but I like the way Forrester forechecks. Brink's got the ability to score goals. He's a playmaker to a degree. He could do both. He could do both. I think Cates could do both. Cates is also good on the forecheck. I
Absolutely.
want to see them all do all parts of it.
I,
Honestly,
I
like
I think if the Philadelphia Flyers continue to kind of fill up with talent over the next couple of years, like as the rebuild kind of comes to a head, if this is your third line in 2 or 3 years, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with that based on where those guys are right now. Obviously, I expect Tyson
Right.
Forster to continue to kind of take some steps. I expect Bobby Brink to continue to take some steps. Um,
Like,
like I that's why
like
that line's got some real potential for a
sure.
long
Now,
time.
here's the thing. Bobby Brink's probably played pretty well, all things considered, for a good almost a month now, I would say.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a goal in that time. He's gone 12 games without a goal, and he doesn't have a whole lot of points to show for it. He's only got 5 assists in that time. Like, we're talking again, 12 games. It's not on the production side, but he's doing a lot of things that keep you engaged in a game, that help you create
The
chances at
things that
least.
John Tortorella loves, even if you're not
Sure.
putting it up on the
And
stat sheet.
and I know that people that like that drives people crazy because they want a point per game player. They want 5 point per game players. Everybody does. Of course you do.
Well, because
But
Colorado had him when they won the cup, and Vegas had him when they won the cup, and Tampa won them when they had the cup. And
okay, but
I get that.
okay, and I'm sorry. Bobby Brink is also 23 years old.
Yep. And like we talked
And
about,
Tyson Forster is 22, right? Like,
well, and like we're talking about with Bobby Brink, like, yes, last year was his rookie season. He played 57, but this is probably the first year where he feels secure in his roster spot. If he
well,
only plays 57 this year, he's going to be disappointed about it.
by now, yes. But
Right.
what I was going to get into is that doesn't mean that even is a full season statement that you're making about feeling comfortable in your role, because he sat out 3 games. Because at one point in time or another, he was still on that John Tortorella development track that was, you're not in. Some nights you're not in. At least early in the year, the way I look at it is that he got early in the year, he got somewhat the Tyson Forster treatment from a year ago, which was, I still don't know.
You have to earn it. Yeah.
He will earn it, but at the same time, there came a point pretty early on where it was Tyson Forster's in the lineup every night because he's forechecks well, he does all those little things, and eventually it turned into goals for him. And I think that was where Bobby Brink was at the start of the year, where it was, I'm not impressed by your camp. I'm not impressed by your preseason enough. I can't give you a full-on spot yet. If I'm picking, especially with, just like Noah Cates, especially with the Lachenko factor at the beginning of the year, I don't know that you're in when he's in, because if I'm gonna play him, I might pull you out.
Yeah, the presence of Jetlachenko on the roster for the first week or so definitely threw some wrenches into the works
Yeah,
as
and
far as how everything else
and
played
for
out.
what it's worth, that was the right call, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and I'm not talking about the Brink part of it. It was, you wanted to see Lachenko, and then you decided the time was not right to keep him up permanently.
And now he's
You know,
scoring nasty goals in World Juniors.
and that's the right place for him to be in right now. I would want him in World Juniors right
Absolutely.
now versus being on the Flyers right now.
Absolutely. Now,
So,
I think, like, quite frankly, I think if he was on the Flyers, they would probably have an extra couple of points. The roster would be a little bit better. But for his personal development and for the long-term success of the team, I think Juniors was the correct decision. And obviously,
it's possible they have a few extra points. What I wonder about, and we'll get into kind of that rookie wall kind of situation, but I wonder how much he would have hit it to begin with. Like, he already wasn't putting up points in those few games to begin with, because it's still a lot to handle,
Sure.
especially fresh from the draft. I think that I don't know that he's adding offense for them. That's what I'll say. I don't know that he'll be adding offense for them.
Yeah, and I think, quite frankly, I think any further speculation would just be a what-if game
Oh, it
because,
definitely is. So,
right,
but I think that's why it was right. It's just that, like,
I
if he
agree.
wasn't giving you all aspects of his game, it was better for him to go back and see what he could do, and let him make World Juniors and let him be part of this thing. You know, all of that. You gave him a taste of it, and I think it gives him something to look forward to over the course of the next year or so. But yeah,
It
it
gives him
was
something to strive for. He knows what it's going to
sure.
take to stick at the NHL level.
Sure. So, was there anything else that you wanted to get into from this game before we kind of move to the broader topics of the show?
Well, so the third period of this game can kind of tie into what we were just
Yeah.
talking
All
about,
right.
and
Then
it'll
I'll pull
also
this
lead
one
us
up.
into some broader topics.
Sure.
So Matvei Michkov did not play in the third period
No, he did
again.
not.
Again.
Yeah.
Um, So, as someone who defended the decision to scratch him the first time it
Mhm,
happened, and then showed some hesitation after the second game, but generally speaking, trusted the process, trusted John Tortorella.
mhm.
I find myself in a pretty similar situation now.
I
I'm pretty sure he's going to get scratched, probably in California somewhere along the road.
I think you're already there. I
You
don't
think he's
think
out tonight?
I don't think he plays against LA.
You think Olalitzel draws in instead? Okay.
Yes. And then I
As we
think
record
from
on
there,
Sunday morning, we do not have lines for that yet. We're probably not going to have lines for a couple hours from a morning skate if there
uh
even is one.
there is not a morning skate, by the way. I can
Right.
tell you.
It
What I'm
must
going
not
to
seem at
try
all.
to
I'm not
find out,
surprised.
and I don't at
And
least on
John
the
won't talk for a couple hours.
well, that was what I was checking was because sometimes they'll give you the time when they send the initial email out, like there's no morning skate. This is when pregame media is. I don't even have that. So there may not be any pregame media. We might just literally, it might literally be a quick release from the team that is, here's your lineup update on social. He's out, Lixell's in, and it happens like 2 hours before the game.
And get ready to see the Brad Shaw clip from after the game. Um,
Nah, I don't think you're going to get that, honestly.
I
Because Tortorella gave you a very detailed answer as to why he didn't play the third period. It wasn't like he like lambasted the kid in terms of, well, he
right.
did this wrong. He made this mistake. I hate his defensive structure. He's,
His energy's down. He
he's
looks.
right. His energy's down. You're new to the NHL. He's 19. He's 19, just turned 20. Okay.
I assume it's his first time in California.
Well, even beyond that, it has like it's been ongoing, right? If he comes out of the break and has a game in Anaheim that looks really good, you chalk it up to he needed a break.
Wipes away a lot of the.
Now the 4-day break hasn't been good enough because the energy level, if it was still down, if it was still to that point where you're feeling the need to sit him down for a period, then you're
And I
getting
do
to the
agree with the benching, by the way. Like, I don't think Michkov looked great. I don't think he was
I
being
think there's
super
an element,
impactful on the
and
game.
I think there's an element where we also get a little harsh with like benching. Okay. Like I understand that that's what it translates to. I get it. What has he done lately? Like honestly, this could have happened 3 games ago. 5 games without a point after 5 games with 2 points a game. And mistakes happening, the team's getting blown out in games. There it was right there for him. And I think John Tortorella let the leash go a little.
I agree, and I think people
Like
will freak out when the scratching comes.
and it's inevitably going to happen. I agree with you. But what I'm also sitting here saying is that John Tortorella 5 years ago pulls the trigger on this after 3-4 games of this.
Absolutely. He looks awful. He's hitting.
Right.
Yeah,
And is driving that point home harder than giving him every opportunity leading up to the break to
just trying to let him play through it.
that's what bothers me about people who are going to sit there and say he's not letting him play through the struggles. This has gone on for
Absolutely is.
7 games, no points. The frustration is mounting, and maybe the reset is good. Now, I'm with people on more than a game kind of material. Reset. I
I'm
think
okay with you.
I think the parallels of this are so perfect for sit him against LA and put him right back in there against San Jose, just like you did before, and let
You did
this
last
kid
time.
run wild against a bottom feeder team, having the motivation of getting a game off and having to watch.
I don't know, man. The vibes in San Jose are getting pretty high. I don't know if they're the worst team in the league anymore.
Oh, I didn't say they were the worst. They're
Oh, I
still at the
know.
bottom.
I
And
know.
and guess what? I don't care how good some of their young players are looking lately. They aren't winning. At the end of the day, didn't they play? Yeah, they played Calgary on Saturday. Did they win the game just because Macklin Celebrini scored another goal? I mean, if you were going to sit there and talk about the vibes of Macklin Celebrini for Calder are getting higher.
Yeah, I was going to say the vibes have swung hard to Matlin Celebrini on that Calder race, and frankly,
And all it's going to take is Macklin Celebrini hitting the wall himself for a week and Michkov having
Michkov has 4 points in 2 games. Yeah,
bingo. Like it's the ebbs and flows of a season. They don't give out the trope just like we said because here's the thing. What did I tell you as he was going through some of the point stuff? I'm like he's going to hit 30 points by Christmas. And I was dead on with it because he had 6 games to get there.
with
He was
only
at
needed 3 points.
27. He needed
Yeah.
3 points in the final 6 games before it, and it felt like that was a given. And then he really hit a wall. It happens.
Sure. And we've talked about it kind of ad nauseum here. That KHL schedule, it's a little bit less strenuous. It's only about 50 games.
What did,
Combined,
what did we talk
com-
about just recently also, though, too? Because
okay.
we were lining up the fact that he was at 27 points in 27 games, and I brought up, the last time they had a rookie that was this hyped was Nolan Patrick. And what were Nolan Patrick's, rookie numbers, whatever it was, right? All that stuff like that. But I gave you a rookie season game total that Nolan Patrick had, which had to do with injury a little bit, right? It wasn't like they just
One Patrick injury?
well, right, but I'm saying it
I
wasn't
mean,
like they
I,
it
I,
wasn't like they had a coach who was doing the John Tortorella development path and sitting him out like every night, right? Or every other night because he hasn't put up points. And I think the number was 71 games. And I
I,
basically right there said that I think is a very comparable number for what Michkov's going to end up with. And you're back in this territory where he's probably going to miss at least a third, maybe, maybe somewhere in the near future, it's a fourth and a fifth for all I know. Like, he's not missing time with injury, so he's going to potentially miss time because they think it's good for him to take a pause. It's not even close to, let's use an example, and we've already said the guy's name in the show, no less, let alone to bring up an example of a player like that was just on the ice against them. How many games did Leo Carlsson play in his rookie season?
have to imagine it was a bunch. I'm going to guess 58.
You're pretty darn close, 55.
Okay.
But they kind of, in a way, and I don't like using this term, but it's the only one I can think of to describe it, they kind of load managed him.
And
And there were nights where he would come out like I don't know if you recall when the Flyers played in Anaheim last season, it was the Leo Carlsson show for the Ducks because he scored all 3 goals they had. The Flyers scored 6 that night, by the way, won the game, but he scored all 3 goals. He had a great game. And I'm pretty sure that the game after or 2 games after, he was out because they didn't want to play him a ton.
yeah, and listen, I know that phrase load management has a bit of a negative connotation to it, largely because of the NBA.
Well, you
And
just don't. I think it's because you don't hear it in the NHL is the point.
right. Well, you heard a little bit out of, I think it was Brad Marchand last year or 2 years ago. They were talking about some of their old guys, and he missed a couple of games, or he missed a game here and there. And I
2 seasons
believe the
ago, this
term,
happened.
I think or it wasn't the record-breaking season. It was the season after the record-breaking season.
Oh, okay then. Because I was gonna say, like
Um,
down the stretch of it, like they even did it with the record-breaking season where the game that they set the record in Philly, half the team didn't play.
maybe that was it then. Yeah.
Like seriously, they had enough guys who were either banged up or it was like close enough, and they're like, "Well, we don't have to play these guys," and then they
Right.
still won the game anyway.
Well, and here's a couple things, right? We talk all the time, or it is widely considered acceptable among hockey fans that hockey has probably the most grueling schedule of the 4 major sports, right? Between the physicality of the game and then the actual schedule itself, right?
Well,
82
sure, because
games,
what you're
3
gonna
games a
hear
week.
because what you're gonna
Uh,
hear about inevitably is that like whether you see something from the NBA and then someone puts up like someone put like I saw it just recently. Somebody pulled up the Tom Wilson picture of the big just blown up cheek that he had after taking a puck to the face. And oh, by the way, he had 2 goals that night anyway, so very funny, right? Or or even like you can imagine, and I get this one to a degree because it is a very extreme circumstance for a schedule, but you see how people react around the NFL when the team has to play 3 times in 10 days because the schedule worked out that way. They played on a Thursday to the following Saturday to a Wednesday because they had Christmas Day games. Like
well,
I get
right, and I'm not gonna debate with anybody that if you play 3 NFL games in 10 days, that's gonna be more physically grueling than,
sure.
4 or 5 NHL games over that time, right? Especially if you are an a lineman, offensive, defensive, any of those guys in the trenches. Ooh, those guys are going through it. They're getting beat up. But in hockey, at some point, we're going to have to recognize that Playing 82 games doesn't often make a whole lot of sense.
Sure. Now, by the way, so speaking of what your point with the Boston team, the night
Yeah.
that they set the record against the Flyers for wins and points and all that stuff. And I don't know if all of the or if any of these were injury related. I think maybe one of them could have been, but they sat that night. They sat out Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, Taylor Hall, Charlie McAvoy, and Dmitry Orlov. And Linus Ullmark didn't back up.
Yeah, so maybe it was the record-breaking year that they were load managing down the stretch.
They definitely were. And then guess what happened? Then guess what happened? They won that game against the Flyers. They won the last 2 games of the season as well, probably doing the same thing, and then took a 3-1 series lead on Florida, and then all of a sudden couldn't win a game. And became one of those.
Falls on their coach not switching goalies, frankly. He got away from the thing that got you there, and I think that's what.
Well, and guess what? That's not the coach there anymore anyway.
And I think that's why. And he sure looks happy in St. Louis.
I'm telling you, and it's only the beginning. Because by the way, that wasn't that a funny around the league story. By the way, that the rosters freeze, but the coaching changes don't.
Oh, they sure don't.
Merry Christmas, Derek Lalonde. You're out. You're out.
In the words of Mike Commodore, pack your stuff.
As the carousel just continues spinning as they go to Todd McClellan. We're back to that, and we'll hear about another coaching change in 3 years.
Also, since we're spinning around NHL news real quick, Alexander Ovechkin returns to game action 40 days after breaking his leg.
I'm gonna tie this into the banner, by the way, because I turned around and I told somebody yesterday. I said, people, even if Michkov gets hurt, people aren't gonna have to worry about this because it's the genetics of this, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Russian machine never breaks, right? Exactly. I can imagine those, in that situation, they're the type of players who just come back quicker from those things. Michkov will have something happen and it'll be like a 2-week, he's out for 2 weeks and he'll be back in a week because that's just how it works. You know what I mean? These guys just they're insatiable when it comes to playing. They just want to be out there. So they work their asses off to get back and heal up quicker than anything.
In Soviet Russia, bone break you.
And he only scored another empty net goal to cap it off, right? So there was one.
Yeah, and listen, he's going to be on the net. He's going to be on the ice for every single empty net opportunity for the rest of the time. That's how that works.
Just don't let the record breaker be an empty netter.
No, it's going to be against the Flyers in March.
I mean, I got to see how he does over the rest of the games leading up to that. There isn't a specific drought, but I wouldn't doubt you right now with the pace.
He's about to get another 2-week break in February. He ain't playing 4 Nations.
True.
I mean, and all the Russians are getting together during that and going, all right, we're tearing this league up.
By the way, after 4 Nations, they are home a ton over until April. It feels
the NFL's not stupid. The NHL's not stupid.
When
they're making the schedule, absolutely. When the season starts.
35
from Gretzky.
But you know what is dumb?
Okay.
Sticking their West Coast road trip in the middle of that.
Well, that's where Gretzky lives. If he's traveling house style,
put it in LA. I didn't think about that. Let it happen in LA again. Okay, I see your point.
Well, and we know Gretzky's going to follow him, right? Like Hal followed Gretzky. Gretzky's going to follow Ovi. I assume, given Ovi's goal scoring tendencies, they're going to have Gretzky following him when he's 5 or 6 goals out, just in case.
Man, I'll tell you what. And I'm not saying it's going to happen this fast. I mean, I'm not going to put anything past this guy. Washington plays at home against Edmonton on February 23rd.
If he scores 30 goals in a month and a half, we all have bigger problems. 25 goals in a month and a half, we all have bigger problems.
Would it shock you though?
I mean, no, because Alexander Ovechkin is a monster.
Lunatic. What was his in coming back and playing? He like I said, he scored an empty netter. That was already what? It's 16 on the season though, and he's barely played 30 games. If that, he's played 19 games.
insane.
You
The
you
guy
don't
is a
you don't think it's possible that over the course of January, where they basically are going to play every other night, that he doesn't score almost on a nightly basis?
Don't ask me to say what is or isn't possible. It's Alexander Ovechkin. Of course, it's
I
possible.
mean, between January 2nd and January 18th, they play 9 games.
14 goals over under.
Not 9 games.
I'm joking. I know, but
I'm
would you be
but
surprised if he came out of that?
I'm
If
not
I if I
I'm not
looked at you
kidding
and
you when I
checked
tell
back in
you
with you on January 18th and said, "Hey, by the way, he scored 9 goals in those games, or
that part.
14 goals in those games," would that surprise you?
Not necessarily.
Right.
Oh, not hold on. Not to mention the fact that during the course of one, and I'm about one. This is about 1 week. Buffalo, Vancouver, Montreal, Nashville, Anaheim. 5 games in a row.
Some soft targets. There's some bad goalies in that lineup. Some bad penalty kill
Oh,
units in that lineup.
by the way, the game before that, if nothing changes between now and a week, is the Rangers.
You know, they're
Better goaltending.
depending on which goalie you get.
Well, Well, in general, I was going to say better goaltending. Can't say the same about the team defense.
The
Good
downfall of the
good
Rangers
segue. You want
is
to talk
so
about
much fun to
defense?
watch. Sure, yeah. So I know we've kind of talked about it throughout the show. We never really went through our little schedule before the break, by the way. So I'll just summarize that here real quick. Since our last show, we had a 6-4 loss to Detroit, a 7-3 loss to LA, a 5-4 win over Columbus, a 7-3 loss to Pittsburgh before Christmas break.
Yeah.
You know what those goals have in those games have in common?
A lot of goals.
Is 4 the fewest amount of goals they gave up against Columbus? Yeah, it sure is. 6,
Yeah.
7, 7. So your best game there was that you held Columbus to 4.
Well, and listen,
Hello?
I hear you. There are elements of some of these games that I think the numbers that you're reading don't tell the whole story because
empty netters and
because I'm going to go twofold with it because there were empty netters there was an empty netter in Detroit. There was you're going back to the Minnesota game, I guess, right? Because the Minnesota game was 4 allowed also.
No, I'm talking Detroit, but you can go back to Minnesota.
Okay, I'm doing that because what I came up with was I told you, as I said when we were talking the Anaheim game, it was 28 goals allowed in the previous 5. That was where I was going with it. So that includes the Minnesota game. Now the Minnesota game had an empty netter.
Yep.
The Detroit game had an empty netter. The LA game had an empty netter, and the Pittsburgh game had an empty netter. So there's 4 empty netters. So okay, now we're talking 24 goals allowed, I guess, with a goalie in net.
Or you gave up 3 to Minnesota, 5 to Detroit, 6 to LA, 6 to Pittsburgh.
Okay, 6 to LA and 6 to Pittsburgh, where they both scored after the empty netter.
Yeah, it's always a dagger.
Right, in complete garbage time. You know, the Pittsburgh one especially being that way because there was still plenty of time left in the LA game. You gave up the empty netter, got down to, 12 seconds left? 18 seconds left. And then they scored with 12 seconds left, I think it was, with nobody's on the power play. Like, that's a power play goal for Blake Lizotte, assisted by, oh God, I don't even know the guys. I think Ryan Shea is his name. And then Matt Nieto. Like, that doesn't even equate to, like, they're not even trying to score there, and they still score.
That is practice for them. They are working out some guys who don't normally get a shot just in.
Well, right, but it's 18 seconds.
Right.
Like, that was a night that the Pittsburgh power play was 3 for 3, and it at least should have been 2 for 3 because you were asking for 18 freaking seconds of killing a penalty in garbage time with nobody's on the ice.
You can't even do that.
And they couldn't even do that. So
by the way, that assist was Matt Nieto's 2nd point on the season.
And I mean, and it happened against LA too. It happened against LA too.
Yep. But I'm just saying, like, it was a bad couple of weeks going into the break. The defense has been poor. The goaltending has been poor.
Well, and like, I don't even think, if I'm lumping the Minnesota game into it, I don't even think the Minnesota game was that bad. It was really good
That's a good team.
Well, it's a good
Yeah.
team. It was really good goaltending. We talked about that on the last show, where it feels like if Konechny scores, then it doesn't get robbed by the glove of Fleury. If Michkov doesn't basically take
Block.
away a goal because he blocks it himself, if one of those goes in, you're looking at at one point in time, I think it would have been the first Konechny one I'm talking about would have been 1-0. They would have led the game, and then the other one would have tied the game. I think we're talking about possibly a completely different result, or at least a different kind of game, if one of those goes in versus trying to constantly chase the game 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. You know, the Detroit game was really the start of some really bad defensive play. That second period was an abomination defensively, with big time mistakes made, and it happened all at once. Kind of, it was all in the latter half, and then that's where the goaltending comes into play, because you've got the game tied in Detroit. It's a 4-4 game. You've overcome the bad defensive play, and you get one bad line change and one shot that really your goalie needs to stop, and that's what changes the game, and you lose.
That was Kolosov, right?
No, that was Ersson.
Oh, that was Ersson. I'm sorry.
Kolosov was hung out to dry against
Right,
LA.
right. Kolosov played the following night against LA, and yeah, they looked awful in front of him.
Again, and it comes down to goaltending again, because that's a game where there's parts of it that look awful, but you get 2 goals from Tyson Forster in the last half of the second period. You're leading 3-2, and in the final minute of the period, Kolosov tries to cover a puck and can't do it, and Andrei Kopitar pokes it through.
It's frustrating how good Andrei Kopitar.
And it's in that moment where if you just lock down 3-2 going to the third, it feels like it could be different. And that game just gets out of hand. They score 4. The 4-goal period became pretty prevalent lately, because it was a 4-goal third against LA that really should have only been maybe at most 2, honestly, but 3.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying at most 2 because you're talking an empty netter in there and then the garbage time goal. But
sure.
But I get the point. And then Pittsburgh was a 4-goal first period, where same deal. And your defensive play, your penalty killing, all of it was just atrocious.
Man, I ended up not being able to make it to that game. Man,
be glad you didn't.
I'm kind of grateful, to be honest.
I bet you are.
I'm hoping the Flyers look better by the time they come back in, I think it's February. And quite frankly, I hope the Penguins have gotten worse by then, so tickets are cheaper. All right. Was there anything else that we wanted to talk about the kind of current team before we look ahead?
No, I mean, at this point in time, the defensive struggles and the goaltending thing, that's why the game against Anaheim was a big deal for Sam Ersson, because it's a bounce back effort. It's more of what we've seen from Sam Ersson. And I think that now, well, one, you hope Kolosov feeds off of it, because he's getting the start against LA more, unless something crazy happens, which I can't see, being the case. I think it's Kolosov's all the way. And then you just hope Ersson builds on it, because if Ersson, let's assume Ersson's getting the game in San Jose.
Well, and hopefully that's a good game for him to build on, right?
Sure.
A team that struggles to score.
Well, just to get those numbers back to something respectable, because I'm going to go and try to pull up his stats really quick, as they are now after the game was over, and then try to really quick cross-reference what his numbers were when I made the game preview. When I made the game preview. Because one really good game can kind of start to bring it back. 2 would obviously do wonders for him. Because
I just think even as far as his confidence goes, coming out of the break and having 2 quality starts back to back would be incredibly huge for him moving forward.
Well, because he had gotten to a point where going into this game, his goals against was 328 and his save percentage was 872. After the most recent run, he hadn't had a game. His highest save percentage since coming back from the injury was 857 in a game.
Nice.
His save percentage against Pittsburgh, where he gave up 5 on 14, was 643.
Yeah, I know.
It's brutal.
Fantasy team. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yep, I
so
sure
you,
know.
so you get one goal allowed for the first time since he was taken out against Boston, or if you want to go for the full game scope, one goal allowed for the first time since he got a win against St. Louis on Halloween. So nearly 2 months since he had played a game where he gave up less than 3 goals. Also means you get a save percentage of .970. Much better. You go from all of a sudden, you go from 328 goals against and 872 save percentage to 314 goals against and 880 save percentage literally overnight with one really good game. Now imagine what a second really good game would do and start to bring it much closer to a respectable, like right on the cusp of being back into that territory. Let's say it's 303 or 305 and your save percentage jumps to 885, let's say. Like I was watching that shot total go up against Anaheim and being like, this is good for him. He needs a game where the save percentage looks good. Even if they don't win the game and he gives up 2 goals, it needs to be good. And they got to that penalty kill at the end, which can't happen because you don't like a penalty on the power play for too many men on the ice. It cannot happen. But you get to that point, they get the penalty kill. He ends up with 32 saves on 33 shots, and you're like, that was it. That was the goaltending performance that you feel like you had earlier in the year when you were winning some games. That's what's going to get you on the right side of things. And now you need to hope that the other goalie follows.
And I know we've spent a lot of this season talking about if the Flyers are a playoff team or not a playoff team. And I think we're learning at this point in the season that whether they look like one or not depends on their goaltending. And I know the defense in front of them is obviously important, but if Sam Ersson is going to show up and look like he looked on Saturday and look like he has looked certain games in the past, he can get you a lot of points and he can get you seriously thinking about the playoffs. But if he stays in the if he stays in the 870s, it ain't going to happen.
But I also think that people need to take a step back and also have a recognition. Like it wasn't too long ago. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was Saturday. Maybe it was. I don't remember specifically. But at some point in time over the course of everything, the KHL still going on. Maybe it was Friday then. That might be what it was because it was everything was starting to come back. And I could open up social media and see just about everywhere. Did you see the save that Yegor Zavragin made in the KHL? And my point with this is that as frustrating as it can be right now to watch them kind of play this game with 3 goalies on the roster and Fedotov's not playing and Kolosov is still very raw and Ersson went through a rough patch and looked like he did at the end of last season during this. I get it all. You've got to have some sense of recognizing that the pipeline has 2 guys in it right now that you can get excited about versus I don't know if there's that many defensemen you can get excited. Certainly not enough defensemen that fill your roster out.
You can get excited about Oliver Bonk.
You can get excited about Oliver Bonk, and I think to a degree you can get excited about a handful of other like I'm not even telling you to curb your excitement for Emil Andre, even though he's back in the minors and has some things to work on. He's still young. You got to give it time. I know people don't want to hear that, but that's a guy who I think you can at least get behind that could be on your roster down the road. I think you can get excited to a degree about Hunter McDonald. I think you can get excited to a degree about Spencer Gill. And I'm sure there will be more to come. That you got to draft other guys too. Really, it's the forward core that I sit there and I do this with more than anything because you've got Jet Lachenko and Denver Barkey's part of this. I know we talk about Denver Barkey a lot. I get that, but I'm saying it's not near enough. Like you even need more forwards than you need defensemen, and I'm pulling maybe 2 guys. Like,
I get that.
Be concerned about that. Be concerned about the lack of center depth. You've got goalies that like I'm telling you, like gear up for 5 years from now.
For the record, I do think Flyers fans should be excited about how do you pronounce it? Rahonen, the Finnish kid on the Finnish World Juniors team. That is someone to be excited. So there are definitely.
I know. I just rolled that off the tongue pretty easily. It sounds like.
I'm sure it took some practice.
I mean, I've heard his name enough. I don't say it every day. I'll give you that. It's a shame because he's playing for Finland in World Juniors right now.
Right.
And Jack Berglund was supposed to play for Sweden and got hurt early on in like the training camps or practices or whatever.
Unfortunate.
And he's out for the whole tournament. So now he doesn't get to kind of be showcased, because you really wanted to see if he was a centerman that you could start to get behind a little bit. Because
Right. Is there a chance he's going to be on your roster one day?
yeah. And it's totally valid. And then you've got to factor in what they do with the draft picks this year. Like, it all comes into play. Like, I know everybody wants to just go and pluck a guy from another team. You know, oh, Dylan Cousins might be available. Well, just go get him because he's a center and he's young.
Yeah, and there's a reason
only
he's
it were that,
available.
if only it were that easy, right? Like people need to put away the NHL 25, put away the fantasy hockey. It's not like that. And getting good players is not easy. And I'm not trying to defend Chuck Fletcher's statement here with that. What I'm trying to say is that it takes time. The easiest way to do it is still to develop. And I know that everybody then is going to sit there and jump on well, then why don't you just draft in a better position? Why are you winning games or whatever? And then I want you to ask yourself, what has that done for the Buffalo Sabres?
Yeah, and
we didn't do it. You know what? We didn't do a show last week, and I had it written down for last week's show, actually, because I wanted to play a little something for you. Not literally, obviously.
Oh,
like,
okay,
it's not a clip.
How many? We've had clips in the past.
Yeah, I know. How many times in the last 11 drafts? This is going back to 2013. How many first round draft picks have the Buffalo Sabres had since 2013?
I've seen some of these stats. It's like a decent number, and a bunch of them have won cup somewhere else.
Well, hang on. Not really, actually. Well, okay, I guess so. No, you know what it is? It's not many of them have won cups. It's two pretty high-profile ones have won cups. That's the answer. That's what you're talking about.
I know. And if you're talking specifically about the picks, it's a little different. Obviously, if you're talking about the failure of the Sabres as a whole, you can throw in like the Ryan O'Reillys and stuff like that.
Oh, sure. Of course.
But okay, so over the last 11 years, I'm going to guess that they've had 15 first-round picks.
That's a really interesting guess. It's not correct for Buffalo, but it's correct for somebody else.
Yes.
What's that?
Okay.
That's 15 first-round picks is the number of first-round picks the Flyers have had since 2013. Interestingly enough. So the number you're looking for Buffalo is higher, by the way. It's 17.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Now, how many of those 17 and do this for the Flyers too? How many of the 15 are currently on the active roster?
Ooh, so I'm gonna do the Sabres first.
Okay. And if you want to, you can. I would say if you want to, you can do it exactly the way you're about to do it, which is try to name the players and see if you can come up with a number.
I know Dahlin was a first-round pick, and these are all Sabres first-round picks, right?
Yes.
Okay. These are guys they drafted, developed in-house, and are currently on the roster.
Correct.
Okay. So there's Dahlin, there's Owen Power.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jack Quinn on their roster?
Jack Quinn is an active member of the roster. That is 3.
So I'm thinking he's the last one, but I don't know their roster well. Oh, was Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen a first-round pick?
No.
Okay.
There are no goalies involved in this process.
That's fine. Goalies are weird. I just wanted to. Right. I knew he was a high-end prospect. I didn't know.
I will tell you, you are you're making.
Am I done?
No, you're making them out to be worse than that. But there's
not.
Okay. You're not too far removed from it, from being done.
I just don't know the Sabres roster like that.
Well, okay. So first of all, by the way, one of them I just said in the last 5 minutes. Dylan Cousins is also one of them.
I forgot Dylan Cousins.
Okay, so that's one of them.
See, we've heard so much talk about them trading him. In my mind, he's already not a Sabre.
Well, that's part of the stat that we're gonna kind of get to, kind of in a way, because if he were to go, then the number comes down, obviously.
Right.
One of these first round picks is on the active roster and is a very recent draft pick.
I have no idea.
Zach Benson.
Oh, okay.
So Zach Benson's also one of them. And the only other one, so the number is 6, by the way.
Number 6.
Possibly soon to be 5 if Cousins gets traded at some point. Is Yuri Kulich.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but that's it. That's the list. 6.
So Flyers. Let me see if I can do this. 11 years, 15 picks. Okay.
Yes. How many of them are active first-round picks on the roster today?
Matvei Michkov.
That's 1.
Travis Konechny.
2.
Was Joel Farabee a first round pick?
Joel Farabee is
He
3.
was. Okay. I know Bobby Brink was a second round pick.
Correct.
I'm like scanning through the forwards real quick. Forrester was a first round pick.
That's 4.
Well, I already know we have more than the Sabres because I can already think of some on the back end. So I think we already have more than the Sabres.
It's not by much, honestly,
Right.
but
Okay. So any
but
more
but,
forwards?
by
I'm running through
percentage, it's better because there's only 15. So
okay, it's way better. Okay, so I'm running through the forward core. Sean Couturier wasn't in the last 11 years.
correct.
He was a first round pick, but he
He
wasn't in
was,
the
but he
last
wasn't
11
in.
years.
So
Right?
I'm gonna take another forward out of the equation for you because it doesn't qualify within that last 11 years. Scott Lawton does not count
Right.
in this
I did
either.
know that too. Right. I was gonna get to him eventually, and I was gonna say the same
So
thing.
you are
Yeah.
so I will give
Am
you.
I done with the forwards?
There is one more forward.
One more forward. Noah Cates wasn't a first round pick, was he?
No, Noah Cates was
No.
Noah Cates is your diamond in the rough. He was like a
That's
fifth.
what I. That's what I was pretty sure he was a late pick, but
No, but I'll give you a
I'm just
hint.
trying to think of home developed guys.
But I'll
at
give
this
you a
point.
hint because you're bringing up Noah Cates because he scored yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Who else scored?
Oh, it's Morgan Frost.
Yes, there you go.
By
And
the way, that was the most first round pick talent we've seen out of Morgan Frost in his entire career. That shot was ridiculous.
Yeah, he went between the legs once.
And okay, banking it off the back of the goalie's helmet is better than that, in my personal opinion.
He didn't bank that off the back of the goalie's helmet.
Was it just off the back of the goalie?
It was a centering pass that hit the stick.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's
It
fine.
was about as fluky as
it was a high
can.
skill goal. What are you talking about?
The move was high skill. The centering pass hitting a stick and going in.
And then as far as defensemen go, by the way, you have Cam York, you have Travis Sanheim.
And end of list.
That's the end of the list. Okay.
Well, I mean, there were more defensemen on the list, but they're no longer. Some are no longer in the league.
Right. One of them's in Columbus for now.
Well, one of them's in Columbus. One of them is in the Flyers development staff. Another one of them's retired. Another one of them I don't know where he is. Another one of them is God only knows where. Because he didn't sign here.
Robert Hagg wasn't a first round pick, was he?
No, he wasn't. So do you want the ones who are not? Because the list of ones who are not is kind of depressing when you think about it.
Okay.
Sam Moran, Ivan Provorov, Yerman Rubtsov, Nolan Patrick, Jay O'Brien, Cutter Gauthier. Now hang on. I'll bring it back for a positive. It's 7 on the active roster today.
Emil Andre.
Well, no, Emil Andre was a second.
Oh, he wasn't a first round pick. No, he was a second. You're right.
At the start of the year,
Chet Luchenko.
It was 8 with Chet Luchenko. And if you really want to get technical, one of the Sabres first round picks from the last 11 years is on the Flyers right now.
So that's really funny.
Because it's Rasmus Ristolainen.
Oh, Rista was a first round pick. Okay.
So,
oh, that's funny. You know, I'm honestly surprised that was within the last 11 years. I thought he was a little bit older than that.
He was the first year. By the way, I didn't remember that this was the same draft year, but Ristolainen was an 8th overall pick in the same draft year. Nikita Zadorov was 16th overall, and they both aren't Sabres.
It's wild. That is.
The
list of people who aren't Sabres.
Because
crazy.
Then the next 2 years, the 2 draft years after that are the 2 obvious second overall picks. It was Reinhart and Eichel back to back. Alex Nylander didn't really pan out to be anything too big of a deal.
He's in Toronto, but he's there because William Nylander's there. Let's be honest.
And he's back and forth between the minors. Let's also not forget that part.
Well, their minors team is in Toronto too.
No, I know, but I'm talking about for his place for an 8th overall pick. Casey Middlestat turned into a pretty solid middle 6 guy.
In Colorado.
After Dylan Cousins in 2019, they drafted Ryan Johnson 31st overall. Don't know whatever happened to him. 2021, after Owen Power, they drafted Isaac Rosen 14th overall. Don't know whatever.
Probably still developing.
Possibly. Well, yeah, but then you get into the territory of, by the way, Kulik was their 28th overall pick in 2022. They picked higher than that, obviously, in that draft because the guy they picked in that draft already got traded.
What's nobody on this show the Buffalo Sabres are being run well.
That pick, by the way, was Matthew Savoy.
Okay.
Who already got moved. So
he's in Seattle, right?
Right. Yeah. So he's not a Sabre.
Nope. But they got really good assets back for all these pieces, right? Like when they got rid of all these talented young players, they got good young players back, right? So they're a good team now. You would think.
I'd have to do it. Oh, you would think is right. I would have to do very extensive research to find like some really good ones out of this. Maybe they got some. Maybe some of those guys they got back for some of these guys have already also been traded too.
Turns
Um,
out when you hire your family friends for all of your C-level positions, you might not have the
but what?
best
But what's?
hockey franchise.
But what's the point of doing this? By the way, what's the point of me bringing this up?
To
Two,
say that there's fans who are worse off than we are.
well, partially, but also there's two first overalls, two second overalls, and it doesn't necessarily amount to you snap your playoff drought.
No, of course. And some of that
Like if you put a
is
roster together of just the picks,
right.
Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart,
Oh,
even
I saw somebody do this recently, and the Buffalo Sabres are stacked.
I mean, even Rasmus Ristolainen and Nikita Zadorov, if you made them your third pair after all of this.
Ryan O'Reilly is like your second or third center. Like these teams are ridiculous.
I mean, you can at that point sit there and turn around and go, which one was? I mean, Cousins is a center. Middlestat would slot right in behind Eichel at center. I mean, so at that point, Cousins is your third line center behind Eichel and Middlestat probably. Reinhardt's a top
Uh,
line.
I mean, depending on are we just doing the last 11 years, or are you doing everybody who was
I'm just
drafted
doing
by this
well, yeah,
team?
I'm just doing this group of players and
Oh,
making a
okay,
forward
okay.
group out of just these draft picks. And I'm saying,
Because if you're going like all-time players who like were drafted by a guy and are still active or whatever, I think Eichel's first, Ryan O'Reilly second, Middlestat's third,
yeah,
and
no,
Cousins is your fourth.
I'm taking O'Reilly out of the
No.
picture
I understand.
and going like, even if you just focused on this group that was drafted in the last 11 years, Eichel's your first line, Middlestat's your second, Cousins is your third. And I didn't even get into some other guys. And then you factor in on the wing, you got Reinhardt's definitely a top line guy. Quinn's probably up there. Benson's up there. Savoy would have been up there. You know,
Yep.
like you got guy like you've got a pretty, and then you've got four defensemen who would be active in the NHL.
Brandon Montour came out of
Well, yeah,
Buffalo,
but
didn't he?
he wasn't drafted in that time, I guess,
Was he
because he
not a
wasn't
first
a
round
draft.
pick?
Maybe
He
he
might
wasn't
not
a
have been a
first.
first round pick.
That probably was it. Yeah. And
But
they moved him to, well, no. Wait,
that's what I'm saying.
Montour wasn't originally in Buffalo.
Was he not? Okay. I
He was in
believe you.
Anaheim.
I could have sworn. Okay. Well, did he go to Buffalo after that?
Yeah, I think
Was he
so.
in Buffalo? Okay.
Yeah, because he went to Florida from Buffalo, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is they traded him straight to Florida, and then he won a.
But he played in Anaheim first.
Oh, okay, okay.
Montour played in Anaheim first, so there's a much longer history there than just Buffalo.
Right. Yeah, he came up through Anaheim system, and
Yeah,
then
so it wasn't even that type of thing.
yeah.
But that's my point. Supplement a couple of these things. You get a Montour, into the picture.
right, and who only has to play on your second or third pair because you have Power and Darlene up top.
Well, either that or Montour's playing with Dahlin or playing with Power,
And
and
then
it works.
Power's on your second pair, right? You get to split them up.
Right,
Even
you split them up exactly the way you have.
Yep. Then you get
But
like a Nashville type top four.
you make the type of trade that you do to get Bowen Byram at some point. Like, okay, then that like they should be so much better than they are. Like
Yep.
from an on paper standpoint, they've got a lot of talent and they've had a lot of talent. The big mistake though of the whole thing was is Jack Eichel still in Buffalo if you just let him have the surgery?
Yep. Yeah, he just signed a deal to stay in Buffalo. He just signed an 8-year contract extension.
So there you go.
Like, don't tell me that people don't want to play in Buffalo or people aren't willing to play in Buffalo. Jack Eichel was willing to stay, and then y'all said, hey, by the way, no, you can't get the neck surgery you want for the quality of the rest of your life.
But that's all I'm trying to bring up is the fact that you've got these players who, over the course of that group, of that time frame that you drafted, several of them high, like on top of the first overalls and the second overalls, I've got 4 times they've picked 8th overall. Top 10 picks don't equate to you're making the playoffs on a regular basis. We've been doing this with Detroit too, right? Detroit just fired their coach. The first time they came into Philly, they looked terrible. And it's like, yeah, Lucas Raymond's a nice player. And you picked him in the top 5, top 10. I get it. What about all these other guys? What about all these guys past it that you've got to fill out the roster? What about
the Yzer plan is in trouble.
Does it make matters better when the guy who has the Yzer plan, who sits down to do his press conference after the coaching change and sits there and goes, if you've got a better way to do it, then tell me. I'm open to ideas.
It doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
So he's getting snappy about it. So that's a very Ron Hextall, it's my way or the highway.
Well, and we're talking I know the Detroit Red Wings have a monstrous history throughout the course of the NHL. They're one of the most storied franchises in the league. But this is probably the guy now as far as
Uh-huh.
faces of your franchise go. Like he's the last guy to lead you to cups. He's the last guy to have any real success with you. It's gonna
No,
be hard. It's
they
gonna be
won.
ugly if that goes south.
They won one time. Well, that's the bigger point that you make.
That's what I'm going for, right?
It's not that he's necessarily the last guy that helped you have success. It's his place in very much like Joe Sakic in Colorado, where if it didn't result in a cup as well while you're running the show, you run the risk of damaging your reputation from a historical standpoint because just because you won cups as a player, Joe Sakic.
Well, and it's Joe Sakic's a crazy example because he's the one who put them into the toilet. Right? Like when Stevie Y took over, the Detroit Red Wings had already been bad for 3 or 4 years at that point. Whereas Joe Sakic put them into the toilet. They were a decent team.
Well, we were having a conversation
under him, and then he had to build it back up.
I was hanging out with some friends yesterday, and we were having this conversation because one of the questions that came up was, after the coaching change in Detroit, who else is even left at this point? It feels like, and as the night went on, it started to hit me as I saw scores from around the league where I'm like, oh yeah, if the Rangers thing doesn't get any better, like that's going to constantly be a conversation. It's got to be
following that for 3 weeks.
There's constantly been talk out of Anaheim, by the way, because of the handling of younger players. That's been a conversation, but you are starting to run out of some because it's like, well, Boston did theirs, St. Louis did theirs. Now Detroit has, Chicago did. Like you're starting to run out of teams that are going to really go this direction that haven't made that change already. I mean, Montreal's been talked about a little bit that St. Louis could be on thin ice to a degree. I've heard that one, but we brought up Nashville with Brunette might be one that's a little bit teetering that thin line, so to speak. But like there's not as many left or whatever. And you start to get into like at one point in time, like I brought up Buffalo, and they're like, yeah, you like you would think a 13-game losing streak would do something. But I went, Lindy Ruff is back for the first year. If anything's going to change there, who it is that needs to go. It's not the coach, it's the general manager, and realistically ownership.
I was going to say the Bills are good though, so.
Well, that's because
that's the unfortunate part. And Buffalo fans know that.
Well, and the next sentence that was out of somebody's mouth was, but they're probably focused they're all in on the Bills.
But the Bills are good. Yep. All right. Speaking of looking to the future, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about this week of upcoming games. We will be back roughly around our normal time next Sunday. There is a game against the Toronto Maple Leafs next Sunday.
Probably going to be the exact same scenario. We'll just kind of
which may or may not have been played by the time you listen to our next show, but we'll talk about the 3 we definitely have lined up, and then we'll talk about Toronto a little bit next week. So the West Coast California road trip continues. There's a game in LA on Sunday night. You play San Jose on Tuesday night. You finish the West Coast portion of the trip on Thursday in Las Vegas, and then you play Toronto on Sunday in Toronto. Yeah, well, I was going to say, so one thing that we always look at as Flyers fans is we look at when the schedule comes out, we look when the West Coast trip is, and it's almost always right after Christmas here. And you look for the dreaded 10 o'clock start.
Yeah, they spared us a little bit. I'll give them that.
We got lucky this year. There's only one.
Well, I was
in Vegas.
I got to admit, big fan of the 4 o'clock start against Anaheim. Big fan.
Very nice. That was huge. That was really nice.
And usually teams are pretty good about making sure that New Year's Eve everybody's out of there, so you're not like so that basically like the point being we're not doing a game that runs right over midnight. They're pretty good about that. Right. Well, everyone, but like in this specific case, there's a way where they could totally make the excuse like we're starting that game at 9 or 9:30 because it's 6 or 6:30 there.
In Vegas, you could get away with starting the game at 10 o'clock local if you really wanted to.
No, I'm sure.
Vegas is insane. On New Year's Eve, you absolutely could.
But the point being, so local time that's an 8 o'clock game, which is really favorable for everything. Not that like I do huge New Year's plans or anything like that, but like the point being that it's going to be.
If you do have plans, you can get to them.
It's also just that it's over with before you get to that point, so that you kind of can come down from the working aspect of the game.
Get home before all the drunk morons are out. because I'm
Well,
sure that's a
well,
non-zero portion of it.
well, that doesn't matter for me because it's not a game
No.
I have to do anything with. If it was in Philly, it would be a different story. But
Fair.
anyway, so I don't hate that. Like, yeah, doing another 10 o'clock or when they play Vegas on a Thursday, that's a little rough, but that is the last one at least. And then man, I gotta tell you, like after now I didn't include it on here because I believe we'll do a show before this, but
Yeah.
the Toronto game's on there, and then get ready for some home games after that. I mean, like I know they're on the road for like this is the big trip, and I get that. They come into January with like they get back from doing this West Coast thing, and it's 4 games at home. They do have a few on the road, but they're all relatively local. Same thing with and I mean, really, the schedule starts to hit a point where they come like they've got an even longer homestand. Like we're talking a 4-game homestand that they have all within a week, basically. That's 4 games in 6 days, isn't it? Or 4 and 7, I think is what it is. It's 4 and 7 and 5 and 8 because it's a Columbus back-to-back where they go on the road right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those two, that getting through that and getting off of the road for a little bit and kind of having those local games again is going to be very helpful. But you got to get through that portion first. So,
Well, let's talk about the actual upcoming games.
No, I
Right?
know.
Like I said,
So
we have
obviously,
LA, we have San Jose, we have
we've really
Vegas.
touched on the LA game already. I feel like the San Jose game kind of intrigues me because San Jose's been a fun team to watch lately, and I kind of want to see what that looks like now.
Well, we talked about the fact that there's a chance Matvei Michkov does not play against LA. Obviously,
Sure.
again, we don't know that. You'll know that as you're listening to this. But if he doesn't, and he gets the opportunity to come back in on Tuesday or against San Jose, I think that is a potential confidence booster for the kid, kind of like it was last time. And if John Tortorella wants to use it as that, I'm okay with it.
Sure. And I do think there's an element where you have to consider, some of the timing of that possible move because, again, you played a couple of home games right before Christmas and that holiday break. So you're trying to keep him on the ice, I think, for the home games as much as possible. And that's why it opens the door for this a little bit. Like, you're on the road, you're on the West Coast. So sit him against LA, maybe even maybe they do sit him against San Jose. I don't know. Like, I don't know how long this lasts that it's a reset like that. But maybe even alternate it. You don't play him against LA. You try to get him back in there against San Jose, and maybe he doesn't do anything that shows the energy's back. And you say, okay, the Vegas one, we're doing this again. And then we'll try again with Toronto and then kind of work on it from there. I don't know.
Nightmares, that's how it goes.
I don't think for what it's worth, I don't think it'll last long like that.
No, I agree.
I don't think it can. It's just you're trying to find, if you're on the road, I think they're very cognizant of, even though people go on the road to watch him as well, because there's people in other cities that are going out there. It's not a home game. It's not in front of the home fans. You're trying to keep him on the ice for the home games.
Yes. Yep. And but as far as the games themselves go this week, LA and Vegas are going to be tough games. San Jose should theoretically be winnable. If you get
nothing this month really has been.
Well, I know, but if you get more than 1 point out of LA or Vegas, I would consider this a pretty successful week.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
as far as kind of where the team is at,
it would be. Well, you know what? You know what I'll say, because you're talking about getting a point. I think if getting 4 points somehow would be great.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm almost assuming a 2 against San Jose.
Well, right,
and then you get more than 1 point against LA and Vegas. That's kind of where I'm going with that.
Right, combined. I mean, look, you could just get those games to overtime, and I think it would still be an accomplishment. But
this team never gets games to overtime. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you mean after the win in Anaheim was only their 8th in regulation this season?
It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
It says a lot, honestly. Like that's a big telltale sign of like kind of what kind of team it is. They don't. Yeah, really. I mean, it is. It don't let that lie to you. Like they've won some games, and 3-on-3 they've been pretty solid. And I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that those points don't all count the same. They do.
But when push comes to shove, and the rubber hits the road in February, March, as we're trying to make a playoff push, that doesn't happen as often. We saw that last year.
Right.
Right. We saw the rest of the league turn up the intensity as we're getting towards the playoffs. And when the Flyers
It's one of
tried to,
the
and when you tried to push the pedal down to keep the speed, you just ran out of gas.
well, and it matters because that's one of the tiebreakers.
Yep.
It's one of the very first tiebreakers is regulation wins, and it's like if you're not doing well in that category, and really kind of need a skills competition vibe almost, because 3-on-3 still has that quality to it to a degree. It's not the shootout, but it's not regulation hockey either. That matters, like so. But we'll see. I at least that game was a step in the right direction, so maybe there's more to come.
Absolutely. And you know what else matters, Kevin?
What?
It matters that you subscribe to us on YouTube.
Yeah, that's
Make
good.
sure to go on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, follow us on the social medias. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where he is just at Kevin Durso. As I just mentioned, find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. That'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week for our first show of 2025. We wish you all a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, a Happy New Year, and we will be back with another year in Flyers hockey. I believe next week starts year number 8 for this show, which is insane to think about. So, all right. We will be back next week, and until then, we'll see you.